All right, hello. I am trying something different for this week, for this analysis. It's going to be the invasion of the Body Snatchers. Because honestly, I'm getting kind of tired of the PowerPoints. They're kind of long, they're a little bit wordy. I figured that it would be easier just kind of like talk my way through this analysis. Just trying something new, seeing if it works out. And all right, so let's get this show on the road. So the movie we watched, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, is a horror sci-fi, and I like sci-fi. I do not like horror. So it was kind of I was surprised because I hadn't realized that it was a horror. So halfway through, I was like, oh no, this isn't great. But it's okay. I won't. I won't. I try not to hold it against it. So basically, how the movie starts is you've got this like unnamed guy at first, and he is put into like he's going to be put into a psych ward or something like that. Like they brought him in for psych eval because he seemed crazy, and the entire film is it's basically a flashback of his entire story. So he's just like telling these two people, these psychiatrists, what went down, and that's like the entire film. So what went down? Well, what went down was a lot. So the main character's name is Dr. Miles, and he is a psychiatrist as well, and he is seeing a bunch of patients in his town Santa Mira who are suffering from like this. A different doctor called it hysteria. That's what they assume it is. So they assumed it's hysteria at first. um, and they've got like a few people who believe that their family members or friends or other are not who they say they are, that they have been replaced, that they are not the real true person that they say they are. So, it starts a little like odd, but as the movie progresses, I think the biggest turning point in terms of like this is something serious is like when they find the first body. So the body is like a blank, and it's this like weird. It almost resembles Jack, one of the characters, and that is startling as well. It doesn't have any fingerprints. It's weird, and obviously like wasn't a murdered guy. It was just a blank. So then the movie continues. There's another body. There's another blank. In this time in Dr. Miles's house with his girlfriend Becky, who he had left to go like look at a case, but then he came back to Becky's house or his house, and he found a blank body of Becky, and he had to save her. So he like took her and woke her up and got her out of there. From there, Miles calls his like psychiatrist friend, and his psychiatrist friend doesn't find any of the same things he does, and he thinks he's going crazy as well. He thinks he's caught this hysteria. Um, but then, like, new development, they find these weird seed pods in his greenhouse. Right. Yeah, so they find these weird seed pods in his greenhouse, and they're like making bodies. So it opens up for the first time, and it like shows that there is in fact like a weird asleep body. And so what they realize is that the alien seed pods are creating bodies and taking the minds and the memories and everything of these people and putting it into these bodies. And when they wake up, they're not exactly the same. They don't have the same amount of emotion. So it's basically this entire film is like an alien invasion, but like from within, right? It was only then that they really realized what happens, because up until that point, like they didn't think it was that big of a deal. But a few nights had passed since the very beginning of the story, and so when they try to like call for help, they like try to the lines are down, and like they realize that most of the town has been taken over by these aliens, and just like overnight, just this whole town, Santa Mira, is just full of them. So they stay holed up in Miles's office for the night, and they don't go to bed because they realize that like sleeping is the only way that people are getting transferred into these pods. And they stay up the whole night. They almost get caught by some like weird alien people, but then in the morning they realize like, oh, this is very bad, because they're looking out the window, and like the whole town just is summoned to the town like square, the center. It's actually a triangle. Um, and they get delivered all these seed pods, and they're just like following orders and looking for Miles because they know that he's on the run. And so they make a break for it. They're chased by these like this huge mob of alien people, and they're chased like through the hills. It takes a while for them to lose track of them, but eventually they do. And it's just him and Becky, who he's been with the whole time. The movie kind of like comes to an end with Becky eventually like succumbing to it and falling asleep, and then Miles kind of like running for help, running to the nearest highway, and then it just cuts back to that beginning scene with the two psychiatrists, and they barely believe him. But then there's like evidence to prove that he was right, and they start like calling all the forces. So that's how it ends. It's like a big cool thing. So yeah, this movie, real interesting one. But I'm not super into the like alien invasion thing. I like sci-fi, don't get me wrong, but like this wasn't it. I will say it was incredibly tense. Like I thought that it was great in terms of tension. It had a lot of it, and it was super good with it. I was like half paying attention while I was watching it, but towards the end there I was like fully engrossed. It was a good time. Um so I think for the themes, I think the biggest theme that this movie had was the I immediately thought about communism when I saw this movie. And I had to like look up some like time frames to really confirm. But this lined up really well with the Red Scare because a lot of people were really terrified that America was being infiltrated by communists and being infiltrated. I think at the time it was McCarthyism. It was a lot of yeah, it was because of McCarthy. And so this film really reminded me of it, and I looked into it, and it seems like that makes sense that was what this was really about, was that it was like a political commentary on how communists are like getting into the government, which really interesting the way that they do that, because I didn't think that I would recognize it, but I did. One of the questions on here, because I'm looking at this for the guiding questions for help, because if not I'm going to ramble for years, but I think one of the questions is like, was it made to entertain, educate, or bring awareness? I think that while it was entertaining, there was this underlying, like, as I was saying, talking about communism and talking about like people that we don't want in our government infiltrating the government overnight, like, because that was people's fears. It was the second Red Scare when this movie came out, and that was the biggest fear, is that like right under our noses there are communists, right? Acting and characters, I'd say it was okay. I think that the main character, Miles, the actor for him, let me actually look at that. Kevin McCarthy did a really good job of like capturing that like desperation of being like the last person and just like this panic. But yeah, I don't know. Becky did not have, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like the way they made Becky. I know that this is an old movie, so like a lot of old movies just have women just like being pretty and like being saved. But I just didn't like that. Because Becky really was not having it. She was like, she had to be carried so many times and was just like really portrayed as like weak. And I don't think I liked that, because women characters in general like deserve to be respected a bit more, I think. And then just like a lot of the women in this movie, like they weren't believed, or they were like shown as weak or something. They always had to have like a man beside. I don't know. I don't like that. To be honest, the characters just felt very like basic and boring. Like, the only real interesting one was the protagonist, Miles, because like I feel like that's what you need to have for a good movie. Like Jack and Becky and that other girl. Yeah. So it was Jack and Becky and Teddy, who all kind of like, I don't know, they didn't really have much to say. And then Teddy's dad also, or no, Becky's dad also. Just like everyone didn't have a lot of a personality, because I mean, the main focus was on these like aliens, but they didn't bring a lot to the table. The acting was fine. I think that they handled it well. I just don't think the characters really had the development. They weren't fleshed out enough. I would say I liked the shift between the like normal people and the alien people because they were obviously like the same actors because that's how that works. But the difference was like big enough to notice, but also not like incredibly different. And I think that that's difficult to do, to not overdo something when you're acting or underdo it. So I think that they just had it enough to where it would be believable that these like alien people would pass for normal people, which I thought was good. Okay, so in terms of direction, I thought the pacing of this film was very good. I thought that it kind of like had that slow build and then it had a lot of action at the end, which was really good. It had that like it waited enough so that it would be satisfying, the conclusion and everything was like exciting, which was really good. There was so much tension. I talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but there's so much tension in that because you're wondering a lot of the time, like, oh, are these guys gonna get out of this? Like, they're so close to getting caught so many times because it's a huge town full of people who are full of aliens. So it's like the odds are very much against them, and they've got to play it super safe to get away from them. Like the one scene where they're behind a door and the alien comes into the office and they've got to be quiet. It's real stressful. It was just like, I think it was like 30 seconds of full just silence, waiting to see if it would come up. So it was like, it was very tense, and the conflict was really good because it was like this big, you know, it was this big deal, obviously, because they were infiltrating his home. But on the other hand, these guys were so much stronger in numbers than him. So again, it was like an uphill battle for a lot of the time, and the conflict was really good there. The tension was really good there. It was incredibly suspenseful. The score. I think the score is probably the most enjoyable part of this film for me because I really love music. And the music here really made it because it was just like so dramatic and so um, it enhanced the movie in such a way that like I don't think that I would have enjoyed it like much at all if there wasn't this like the score wasn't good, if the music wasn't amping up all the action, the suspense, the like everything. It was much better with the music, and the score really did a good job at like making everything have emphasis and everything. Like when the music went quiet, it also like, you know, really created a different atmosphere. It was very nice, and they did a really good job. I thought it might have been a little too loud, but honestly, I think I can totally forgive that because I think it needed to be loud in order to get, you know, the drama across, the real suspense of it all. In terms of cinematography, I never have too much to say about cinematography because I don't particularly notice shots in movies like that. Oh, so for cinematography, I think that it's worth mentioning here that this movie was in black and white, which is, you know, we've watched more black and white movies in the past, but it's interesting now because there is color as an option and they chose to have it black and white. Like, and I think it was more than just like a budget thing. I think if I'm reading, I know I read some stuff about it being more of like a film noir kind of vibe, and I totally get that. Like Miles definitely had like a detective vibe about him. He was like witty and a little reckless, and that kind of like fits into that stereotype a little bit. But the black and white was really interesting because it allowed for really stark contrast between like the lighting and everything. Like I think that the like the seed pods were very like bright, almost like glowing. It gave it like that alien feel, that like really hyped up sci-fi kind of vibe, the tone, if you will. I honestly didn't notice like any super different shots. Um, I wouldn't doubt if there was some Dutch tilts in this film. It seems like it would be an appropriate place to put them. The action was shot well. Like the camera moved pretty smoothly. I thought there weren't any like jerky movements that I noticed. And everything was framed pretty well. Moving on up, production design. I honestly liked the production design. I thought that the seed pods looked pretty, sci-fi, like very much sci-fi. They were kind of like gross looking, and oh my god, and I'll talk about the special effects a little bit later, but the like bubbling and the grossness of the actual bodies that came out of them, like when they were coming out of them, was really good. I thought that was super, in theme with everything going on. The greenhouse looked great, and the office looked really lived in. The houses all seemed very realistic. Like everything, all the sets were done really well, and the props were done really well as well. In terms of special effects, I think the biggest example of the special effects in this film were definitely the pods. Like I think the scenes where the bodies are coming out of them and everything is bubbling and sort of like the pod is sort of like melting away from the bodies. That was probably hard to do, because they have to do a bunch of there's like movie tricks, like they talk about like using chocolate or like the chocolate syrup for blood and stuff like that. I'm sure they had to do some shenanigans to get that done, and that was honestly pretty believable in terms of like aliens, because aliens aren't like incredibly believable, but that felt spooky and alien-like and gross, which was super what they were going for, and I think that they did a good job. I'd say that they were actually kind of impressive for the time period, because I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of really good special effects yet. I feel like the movies that we watch, just because they're like older and the only techniques they really have is like practical effects. A lot of the times, because they don't have a lot of like good computers. So it was pretty impressive, I'd say. I'd say they were overboard, but they were overboard, but in the best way. Like, because when you do sci-fi and you do like fantastical stuff, like aliens invading a town, you have to have some sort of overboard kind of thing. And I think that they definitely like suited the story really well. Aliens are not normal. You need some sort of special weird effects on that kind of thing. So I think the special effects were done well. The editing was good. I didn't have any problem with the editing. I thought the editing was like clean. Like everything in the movie flowed well. There wasn't any like, I didn't feel like any scenes really dragged down the plot. Obviously, I didn't love the film all that much because, again, horror. I'm not super into it, but for the most part, from what I noticed, it wasn't nothing dragged down. Everything was super clean. I don't think there were any super neat transitions. I know I said this in the last review I made, but man, Rope, it has absolutely blasted my expectations for transitions, because they were great in terms of, my god, for the time period. Yeah, those are good transitions. And now anytime I see a transition, I'm like, well, could be better. But anyway, yeah. The pace, I talked about it a little bit before because it's in the like direction category as well. But the pacing was really good for this movie. I thought that, like, although I think it started out a little bit, well, I was going to say it started out a little slow, but it didn't really, because it started out with, like, a mystery, so I don't think it started slow. I think it built up well. It, like, started off as, like, this is curious, and, this might be hysteria, and then, what is causing this, and it kind of, like, jumped to aliens a little bit. Except it didn't. Like, it flowed naturally into aliens somehow. And I think that all the events after, while the invasion, I think, was very quick, I think that was very much purposeful, because, again, like, referencing McCarthyism and the Red Scare, people thought that that's how fast it was going to go, that the entire government was going to be corrupt. And so that makes sense why the action really picked up towards the end there. But it really did good. I thought it was like a good pace for what the movie was. The organization was fine. Like, just it flowed well, and it did a good job of pacing out everything and making the big dramatic scenes have a heavier impact. because of the way that they kind of like built them up throughout the film. Lastly, we have dialogue, and honestly, I don't know what to say about this because I don't remember the dialogue being particularly good. Honestly, I don't think there was a lot to say about it. There were like some witty comments, and like there was definitely like subtext to what people were saying. Like there was definitely like some foreshadowing going on at the very beginning in terms of dialogue, but to me anyway, it wasn't super interesting. I didn't find that a lot of it I think it furthered the plot, and like there was actually not that much talking going on. But I can't pinpoint an exact reason why I thought the dialogue was boring. It just felt That's what it was. It just felt a little unnatural. Like I think this whole movie felt very unnatural in terms of dialogue. Yeah, that's what it is. Is that it just everything felt so weird. Like it felt like people were almost making fun of the theme of it just because of how like odd it was. Like especially there was a scene towards the end where the group of aliens are talking about the seed pod, and I know that it's supposed to be like them being very like monotone and having no emotions because they're aliens and they don't need them. But it just felt like it felt like they were making fun of it. They were like, "Yes, I will put the seed pod in the thing, and she'll be gone by morning." It just felt they could have made it more sinister. I think that there was something really like off about the way that like that was handled. I know that they were supposed to be emotionless, but I feel like even then, I think they should have shot for more like robotic rather than just socially awkward, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think that that was the problem that I had with it. And it's also just like regular conversation just felt really like cheesy, like awkward. Just like a weird vibe with the conversations. They were important conversations. I don't think anything like they said didn't need to be said, but there was a lot of just like awkward, a lot of awkward conversations. Like that's not how you talk to people a lot of the time. But yeah, they like, it matched the like weird tone of everything going on, and there's a lot of context brought, but it just is a little awkward. All right, let's do a little bit of a recap then. So this is my cool review of Body Snatchers, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, directed by Don Siegel, and it's a sci-fi horror. It's pretty neat. I didn't love it. I don't get me wrong though. I think that this movie had a lot of tension that like I don't regret having watched it because even though it's not really my cup of tea, I definitely took something away from that. Like there was some cool like history context going on, like in terms of the time period that it was made, and I found that interesting, and like it's really cool to see like the beginning of like type stuff where it's like just everything is about aliens, and there's a bunch of I like to see that this is where the little humble beginnings were. Um, the acting was alright. The score was wonderful. It was great. Honestly, the direction was done really well too. I thought the themes were really interesting, as I said, with like the whole Red Scare and McCarthyism stuff. Um, Production design was pretty well done in special effects. I think it really lacked in dialogue, but yeah. So that was kind of like my little podcast review. Just trying something new out here. We'll see how it goes. I'll see if I'll do this again. But yeah, so that's my review of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Hope you have a good one.